Right, so we're in a very special tekufa right now. This time period that's between Pesach and Shavuos, as we know, is what's known as the time of Sfiras Omer, right? So we know there's a mitzvah. Again, nowadays it's a question whether it's biblical or rabbinic, but there's a mitzvah of counting every single day. And like many other mitzvahs that we do, there's a bracha that we say before the mitzvah itself, right? So we know that there's such an idea that Chazal instituted something called Birchas HaMitzvahs that we say before the mitzvah. So, for example, before you shake lulav and esrog, so you make a blessing on the tilas lulav, v'chulu v'chulu. So the same thing over here. You make a bracha, asher kidshanu v'chulu b'mitzvahs v'tzivanu al sfiras ha'omer, right? And then you count the omer, then you count the day. Today is day 4, day 5, and so on. What's interesting is that when it comes to this particular mitzvah of sfiras ha'omer, we find that there's an extra urgency and an extra care that Chazal sort of have to make sure that you count with a bracha. Give an example. Everyone knows that if someone asks you, let's say tonight, someone asks you what's the sfira for tonight, then you didn't count yet, right? So what do? So you say, well, yesterday was so and so, right? Why? So that's actually in Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says the reason that when someone asks you at night before you counted, what day is the Sfira? What day is the Omer? So Shulchan Aruch says, it's a halach in Shulchan Aruch that you have to respond, well, yesterday was so-and-so. Why? Because if you say today is so-and-so, then it's questionable, maybe that was the mitzvah, and then you won't be able to count with a bracha. So there's something special about Sfiras Omer that we're extra cautious and extra careful that it should be done with a bracha. So the question is why? What's the special connection between the bracha and the mitzvah in the mitzvah of Sfiras Omer more so than any other mitzvah? We don't find, in other halachas that there's a special halacha that was created to make sure that you get to do the mitzvah with a bracha. That's question number one. Another interesting thing is the Rambam. When the Rambam discusses the mitzvah of Sfiras Omer, so the Rambam talks about, again, this idea that before you count, you have to make a bracha. And the way the Rambam says it is like this. Again, words in Hebrew, V'tzarech levarech b'chol layla, you have to make a bracha every night. Asher kidshanu b'mitzvahs v'tzivanu al Sfiras Omer, the regular nusach. Says the Rambam, Manav loy berach, let's say you counted without making a bracha. So yotze, so you're yotze, right? No different than any other mitzvah. You do the mitzvah without the bracha. You should do the bracha, but if you didn't, you're yotze the mitzvah. Says the Rambam, though, ve'eina chayzer u'mavarach. If you counted without a bracha, you're yotze, and you don't have to make a bracha later. The question is, what's the Rambam talking about? Of course you don't have to make a bracha later. What type of havamina is that? If you shook lulav and esrog on sukkah, and you didn't make a bracha, so you did the mitzvah. Someone has to tell you, oh, by the way, if a few hours later, don't make the bracha later. Of course you don't make the bracha later. The bracha was instituted before you do the mitzvah. No, if you did the mitzvah already, so it's too late. Why does the Rambam have to go out of his way to tell us that if you counted, you should certainly make a bracha before you count? And if you count without a bracha, you're yotze. Says the Rambam, but also, one last thing that you might not realize is that if you counted without a bracha, don't make a bracha later. Of course don't make a bracha later than that. You already did the mitzvah. So there's a chiddush from the Vilna Gaon. Okay? There's a little bit of halacha, and then we'll go into the machshav, what the Rebbeinu Shalom is telling us from the halacha. The chiddush from the Vilna Gaon is like this. The Vilna Gaon said, he writes this on his commentary to Shulchan Aruch, he says that there's something different about the relationship of the counting of Sfiras Omer with the bracha that comes before the counting, more so than any other mitzvah. Again, let's see the example of shaking lulav and esrog, right? So by shaking lulav and esrog, what's the mitzvah? Shaking lulav and esrog, right? But there's a bracha that you say before the mitzvah. Said the Gra, when it comes to Sfiras Omer, it's not like that. The Gra said that Chazal instituted that the actual text of the bracha itself is the counting. In other words, the bracha begins with Baruch Atah Hashem. As we usually tend to think of it, when does the bracha begin? You say Baruch Atah Hashem. When does the bracha end? Al Sfiras Omer. And then you do the mitzvah. Today is day 4, day 5. Says the Gra, it's not true. The Gra says when you say today is day 4, today is day 5, or whatever the day might be, that's part of the bracha itself. It's one long nusach. Give an example. There's one of the Rishonim, he's called by the Rav Yah. The Rav Yah was one of the great Rishonim of Germany in the 1200s or so. So his version, his text of Sfiras Omer was the following thing. Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvot tzivanu al Sfiras Omer, shehayim yaim pleinil Omer. Thank you, Hashem. Blessed be Hashem for someone that you gave us this mitzvah Sfiras Omer. That today is day 4 or day 5. It's one long thing. That's what the Gra says. And therefore, even though we don't have that version, we say just today is day 4, today is day 5. Says the Gra, it's part of the bracha itself. It's an extension of the bracha. Now, once you have that point, that answers some of these questions. For example, the first question we asked is, why is there such a sensitivity when it comes to Sfiras Omer to make sure to count with a bracha? If someone asks you what today is, don't even say what today is. Say today what day yesterday was, in order to avoid any question of losing the bracha. Why are we so careful about the bracha? The answer is because that's the mitzvah itself is to count as part within the context of the blessing. That's the mitzvah itself. It's not just to count on its own. It's to count as part of the text of the blessing itself. And this is also why the Rambam that I quoted a minute ago, that the Rambam said that if you count without a bracha, you're yotzei, and you don't have to make a bracha again. You don't have to make a bracha, a little bit later. And the question was, of course not. Whenever you do a mitzvah, if you're yotzei, of course you don't have to do the bracha later. The bracha always precedes the mitzvah. But the answer is, in this case, it's a little bit different. Because you might think that since I didn't count with a bracha, so I didn't do the mitzvah properly. The mitzvah itself is flawed. The mitzvah should be done, the counting should be done as part of the text of a bracha. And therefore it says the Rambam, so you might think that if I counted without a bracha, it didn't work, I wasn't yotzei. Right? Or maybe I was b'di'evid, I should recount again with a blessing to make the mitzvah better, to count it within the context, within the text of a blessing. That the Rambam says you don't have to go that far. But again, the concept over here is that what we're learning is that from the Vilna Gaon is that what makes Sfiras Omer unique, one of the unique qualities of Sfiras Omer is that the mitzvah is to count not just on its own in a vacuum, preceded by a blessing. The counting, the text of the counting is itself part of the text of the blessing. So the question is why? Why would Chazal go out of their way to make such a strange thing for Sfiras Omer? Like, why do that? Why make Sfiras Omer the outlier? Why make it different than any other mitzvah, which is that you have the mitzvah and you have the blessing that precedes the mitzvah? Why Sfiras Omer is different? Okay, so let me share with you an idea. There's a famous Chazal. Chazal tells Rashi, I think, where he brings it in Chumash, that when Hashem first created the world, so what day was it? I don't know, day 3, I think, was when Hashem made vegetation, right? The vegetables and trees and so on. So Rashi brings down from Chazal that there was a little bit of a hiccup in that process. Chazal said that when Hashem Yisbarach first decided to create the trees, it was eitz pri, isa pri, meaning that not only would the fruit taste delicious, but even if you tasted of the bark of a particular fruit tree, you would taste the sweetness of the tree, of the fruit in the tree itself. Eitz pri, that the wood itself, the bark of the tree, would taste of the fruit. That's what Hashem wanted, so to speak. But something happened along the way that it didn't turn out like that. For whatever reason, it didn't turn out like that. And instead of the tree tasting of the fruit, it's an eitz, there's a tree, and then there's a fruit. What does that mean? What does that mean? So there's a teaching from Rav Kook. Rav Kook wrote this. It's found in other Sfarim too. Rav Tzaddik. There's many Sfarim that say this idea, which is the following thing: that in this world there's two separate things. There's means, and there's an end. There's what a person does in order to get to a particular tachlis, right? So you have a certain destination. That's where you have to be. Now it might take a while, so you get in your car, whatever the case may be, to get that destination. While you're driving, while you're on your way to your destination, do you feel that this isn't that there's some inherent, quality or something meaningful in the traveling itself? No, this is a means to an end. Okay, no harm, no foul. We're used to that phenomenon. The problem is that when we translate that same experience in terms of, let's say, traveling to your destination, we translate that in terms of Yiddishkeit as well. There's a certain goal, there's a certain tachlis, and it's true, there are certain goals that a person has in Yiddishkeit. There are certain goals. A person wakes up in the morning, and they have to go daven. So what's the goal? The goal is to get to shul. The goal is to get to shul. Well, now that there's a goal, there's a destination, now I have to have means to get to that goal. I have to get in my car, whatever the case may be, get dressed, and to walk to shul, or to drive to shul. So we tend to think that just like in matters of this world, the goal, the means, the emsoi, the means towards the end, lacks significance. So too it is with Avodas Hashem as well. Where does that phenomenon come from? That we don't taste the fruit in the tree. You see, what is the tree? a tree is the means to get to a particular end. You want the fruit. How do you get a fruit? Well, you have to have a tree. So we usually, in matters of this world, what is delicious? Where do we taste sweetness? In the tree, in the fruit, right? Which is the goal. That's what you want at the end. Sweetness is when you get to your destination. Sweetness is when you get to shul and you actually daven, right? Or you sit down and you actually learn, when you actually do the mitzvah. But then there's a phenomenon, in order to get to that fruit, you have to have a tree. So you have to walk, you have to go, you have to work. The problem is that the Rabbanan Shalom wanted to create the world in such a way where the tree tasted of the fruit. Which would mean that the Rabbanan Shalom, what he wanted, and what the deepest truth still is that every time a person puts in effort in order to get to a particular destination, although it might not seem to us as if that effort has inherent value, it might not feel to us that that effort has inherent meaning, and it's just a tree to get you to the fruit. But the truth is, a person has to be mechazik themselves, a person has to strengthen themselves with the belief that every effort that a person puts in is itself meaningful. Let's say it gets to the fruit, let's say it gets to the destination or not. Let's say the guy, starts going to shul and something happens, he doesn't get there. Or he's about to sit down to learn, opens up a sefer, the phone rings, something comes up, he's not able to do it. Or the person's, working like a dog all day long in order to make a parnasa, and the parnasa doesn't come at the end. And so the whole goal was to get that parnasa in order to support the family, in order to give tzedakah, you name it, whatever the goal was. And all of a sudden, that tree did not bear the fruit. So now what do you do? So the whole thing's meaningless. The whole thing's fruitless. There's no sweetness in the bark. This is one of the curses of life. See, we're in a special time period right now where a person can make that mistake. See, this is a time period of Sfiras Omer, right? Where in a certain sense, the entire focus of this time is just to get us to Shavuos. Right? We know we just went through Pesach, right? Which is the emergence of the Jewish people, the Jewish people discovering their faith and their identity. And then even Hashem Yisbarach says, when Hashem sent Moshe Rabbeinu to take us out of Egypt, Hashem said, I'm taking you out of Egypt, why? Not just to be free. To get you to Shavuos. So every single moment of this time period, of these 49 days that we're in the middle of, right? That link Pesach till Shavuos, what's the essence of this time? To work on ourselves and to get ourselves ready to receive our personal level of Torah, our personal portion of Torah on Shavuos. And that's a gewaldige thing. But there's a very, very critical mistake that a person might make when you're living in this time, which is to think that although the focus right now is to prepare ourselves for what's going to come on Shavuos, but maybe the whole thing is about Shavuos and there's nothing valuable in the preparation itself. So therefore what Hashem Yisbarach did was a phenomenal thing. Hashem Yisbarach gave us this time, which it's true, the focus of this time is to prepare ourselves for the Yontiv of Shavuos, to receive our portion of Torah. But Hashem Yisbarach said that I don't want you to make the mistake of thinking that time of preparation, if let's say it doesn't lead to Shavuos. Let's say it doesn't lead to Shavuos. Let's say, you're working all these 49 days, and Shavuos, you fall asleep Erev Shavuos, and you wake up Matzah Shavuos. And the whole thing is lost. So everything was meaningless. What happens if the tree doesn't bear fruit? So Hashem Yisbarach gave us such an unbelievable special mitzvah called Sfiras Omer. What's Sfiras Omer? Sfiras Omer is that this is one day of the 49 days. And your avodah right now is to prepare yourself to get to that mountaintop, right? To get to that mountain of Har Sinai by Shavuos. But along the way, don't make the mistake of thinking that there's nothing valuable in the effort itself. Count this day. Count this day. What does it mean to count a day? It means to put it on a pedestal. It means to consider it something chashuv. Don't think of it as just a means towards an end. Although that's what you're doing. What you're doing is walking to shul. What you're doing is going to your chavrusa. What you're doing is working in order to make a living. But don't think that the effort that you're putting in order to get to that end loses its value. Because all it is just trying to get you to that end. Count that day. Be machshav that day. It's an amazing thing. There's no mitzvah of counting Shabbos, right? There's no mitzvah before. There should be a mitzvah. Why not? Counting something makes a chashuv, right? So why is there no mitzvah? Erev Shabbos, there should be a mitzvah. Standing up and saying, today is the 7th day of the week. Why is there no mitzvah on Yom Kippur to say, today is Yom Kippur? There's no mitzvah like that. The only time where we have this mitzvah of counting a day, of saying this day counts, this is meaningful, this is inherently valuable, is specifically Omer. Why? This time of year. Why? Because this is a specific time where you might make a mistake of thinking that it's not inherently valuable. No one's going to think Shabbos is not valuable. The whole week is leading to Shabbos. Who's going to think Yom Kippur is not valuable? The whole year is leading to Yom Kippur. But this time you may make that mistake. Because the entire effort of this time, the entire energy that we have to be thinking about is, what could I do to make myself better? What could I do to improve myself, to allow myself to receive my portion of Torah in a few weeks? Well, so you might think that all the effort I put in to do that is only significant if it leads me to that experience of Har Sinai. So Hashem says, not like that. Hashem says, count these days. Realize that every effort that a Jew puts in order to get to Har Sinai, whether you end up getting there or not, is already full of value. So I said from the Vilna Gaon, it's an amazing thing. So Chazal, what Chazal did therefore was to establish even in the halachas of Siras Aimer this message. As I mentioned, whenever you do a mitzvah, right? Before you do a mitzvah, you make a blessing. What does that mean? Why did Chazal institute that idea that you make a blessing before a mitzvah? You know why? Because what the Baruch Shalom, what Chazal are telling us is the mitzvah, that's the goal, right? That's the goal, that's the fruit. But you have to prepare yourself. You have to prepare yourself, right? What's the preparation? So before you put on tefillin, so you take a second and you say, Baruch Atah Hashem, you appreciate it, I'm about to put on tefillin, and you get yourself ready. That's walking to tefillin, right? It's like walking to shul. And therefore, Sfiras Aimer, the entire mitzvah Sfiras Aimer is the bracha. Remember, what did the Gra say, right? The Gra said that Chazal instituted that the counting itself should be with the context of the bracha, meaning that when it comes to Sfiras Aimer, don't make the mistake of thinking of separating the blessing, which is the preparation, from the mitzvah, which is the goal. Sfiras Aimer, the goal is itself the blessing. You follow? The goal is itself the blessing. In other words, when you're preparing yourself, don't think that the entire preparation of Sfiras Aimer is just a means to an end, and if I don't end up getting there, then the whole thing was lost. It's quite the opposite. Every effort, every little energy that a person does to put in to better oneself, whether it actually gets to something, whether it bears fruit or not, is inherently valuable. And that's the mitzvah Sfiras Aimer. So every single day that we wake up in the morning during this time, the thought has to be, what could I do to make myself better? What could I do to improve myself, to get myself ready to receive my portion of Torah? But along with that, you have to realize, and we have to also have a second thought, which is, and whatever I do to prepare myself is inherently valuable. Whether the preparation ultimately leads or not. Although we don't taste the sweetness of the fruit in the tree, but the truth is, that's what Hashem thinks. That's the way Hashem thinks. Again, that's the mitzvah Sfiras Aimer, where the blessing, where the mitzvah, which is the fruit, is itself the blessing. It's itself the blessing. The means, the preparation itself is the mitzvah. The preparation is the goal. It is the goal. Let me share with you, I'll just end off a few lines from Likutei Moharan. Right, there's a very, very powerful sentence, really. In Likutei Moharan, in Tinyana Memches. Menachem over there is talking about, he says that when a person, I'll share with you words, when a person begins that path of walking to shul, so to speak, right? Of coming close to God, of preparing oneself to receive their Torah on Shavuos, right? And Rabbi Nachman says very often the sense is that you're very, very far away. Because once you when you're under the covers in bed, so you don't, shul's not even on the radar. All of a sudden, when you get yourself ready to go to shul, you open the door, shul is very far away. And so the beginning of coming close, it feels like you're very far. Rabbi Nachman says like this, but a person should realize, Ish Kazeh, such a person who feels very far away from his goal, should realize that that every little movement that you make, every little centimeter that you push forward, moving a little bit, a centimeter away from your gashmias, from your just base animalistic tendencies, and you move a centimeter closer to that goal called shul, that goal called Hashem Yisbarach, he gedoyla v'yikara is exceedingly precious in Hashem's eyes. Hashem looks at the steps along the way towards the destination as the goal itself. This time is not just to prepare ourselves for Shavuos, it's to appreciate the preparation itself. Rabbi Nachman said, and even a little movement, a little point, that you hold yourself back from something negative, from something damaging, and you push yourself a little bit closer to the goal of what you set for yourself. You should know that although down here you only feel like you moved a centimeter, in Hashem Yisborach's mind, in Hashem Yisborach's world, where the tree tastes of the fruit, you've moved tens of thousands of millions of light years. That's what Nachman says. Every movement down here that you've moved a little bit closer to your goal is itself the entire tachlis in Shemayim. And that's what Sfiras Omer is about. Sfiras Omer is a time where we have to be able to be careful to not make this mistake of thinking that as we prepare towards that day of Shavuos, to not make the mistake of thinking that the entire tachlis is just to get there, and if we don't end up getting there, the whole thing was a waste of time. Every movement is inherently valuable. And Hashem should give us the strength to mechazik ourselves like that. That every little thing that we could be mechazik ourselves to stay away from anything, even in the slightest way negative, and push ourselves even in the slightest way towards something positive. That's the tachlis. The whole creation was worth that little movement. It's the whole goal. Hashem Shalom, each and every one of us should be able to absorb that chizik and be able to prepare ourselves in a healthy and productive way to get closer to that day, which is coming soon. Be able to receive our portion of Torah. And all of us together will be able to receive the greatest portion of Torah.